What's up, guys? My name is Fari, and I build systems that remove bottlenecks within businesses. And I've been documenting my builds for 133, 34 days now, going all the way up to 365. And in today's video, I just whipped out the camera and I just wanted to just chat about setting hard goals and how that has ultimately rewired my brain for mastery. And I think for me, this is one of the things that I have been thinking about a lot, especially starting with the daily videos. I don't think a year ago I would have imagined or seen myself being able to do 133 videos each and every single day. And that is something that ultimately comes as a result of setting really hard goals and ultimately believing that it's going to happen. When I started, with these daily videos, I said, I saw Ryan Clogg, shout out to him. And I was like, hey, if he can do it, I can do it. And let me try out for 30 days and see how it goes. And then after I was done with 30 days, I was like, hey, no one ever really remembers the guy that did 30 days and ultimately quit, but they remember the guy that did 100. And now we've smashed through 100. Now I was like, hey, no one really remembers the guy that did 100, but they remember the guy that did 365. And I guess that only comes as a result of setting what you think are hard goals, and that has ultimately allowed me personally to reach a new floor that I may have not fully internalized a year ago, but now I internalize and is now part of my identity. If I say I'm going to do something, I have to do it no matter what, no matter how I feel, or no matter how things may seem in that moment. But that also comes as a result of simply just believing that it's going to work out. Because also you can set hard goals and say, hey, I'm going to do this and I'm going to push towards this, but not understanding that there's so many things that you may not see in that moment in time that you have to go through in order to reach that final destination. But it ultimately starts from you saying, hey, I want to set out this hard goal. It may seem insane today, but ultimately over time it will be something that I will definitely achieve. I've always been such a big believer in terms of being true and sticking true to what I believe in, and just being so determined on making sure that I'm going to get to where I want to get to, no matter the cost, in terms of what it's going to take to get there. And also realizing that there may be times that may bring uncertainty, and I've spoken about this in the previous video that I made a couple days ago about building in uncertainty. And I think this also ties pretty well as a sequel to that just doing the thing ultimately means that you're then getting over that unsured or uncertainty, simply because you're building through that. And that is the mode that I've been keeping and holding strong true with me throughout the past few months and even a year. It's just that, hey, no matter what, I need to make sure that I'm building each and every single day and setting really hard goals, ultimately because those hard goals ultimately bring a new version of myself, and you experience a lot more growth in discomfort. And I'm sure like a couple of the guests that I've had over this my series of posting each and every single day, they share somewhat of the same sentiment, that ultimately you grow a lot more if you're in discomfort rather than growing if you're in comfort. And I think this is one of the things that I hold true to myself as well, of how can I put myself in the most uncomfortable positions, but also understanding that those uncomfortable positions are ultimately where my growth is formed, and ultimately where I understand I need to push a lot further. And I know setting up the things of talking about systems and really understanding processes, and that is really difficult, to be honest with you, but that's the reason why I also do it. And I think it's somewhat of a internal wiring to just chase towards hard goals and really strive towards that and build to the future. And when I was young, I never really understood it, but the older that I get, I fully appreciate how much growth comes from setting those hard goals, and ultimately understanding that each video and each thing that you're doing today is ultimately a brick into the foundation of the things that you're going to be building into the future. And that ultimately starts from setting those hard goals, and then knowing hey, how am I actively gonna obtain these, and then ultimately having metrics and measures in order to track your progress as well. Because it's also one thing to say, hey, I want to reach this ultimate goal, but on a day-to-day, I don't know what my metrics look like. I don't know what my numbers in terms of, the compounding interest that I'm forming towards, gaining, whatever it is that I want to gain. And also understanding that, as myself, I need to grow each and every single day and just keep on pushing the envelope of what I think is, impossible today into the new realm of possibility tomorrow. And that means, coming up with new ideas, using these videos as somewhat of a rapid iteration tool that ultimately allows me to refine each and every single facet in terms of my thinking, also, how I'm able to then articulate in these videos as well. And also documenting as well, because I think that's one of the most important things, to really document how this journey is, and really show that there may be sometimes where I'm failing and I don't know what exactly to do, but ultimately figuring that out and always being a believer of the end goal. And if you don't believe that something is going to happen, how do you expect it to happen if you yourself don't believe it's going to happen? How do you expect people to buy into your vision of what it is that you want to build if you yourself don't even buy into that vision? You can't sell something that you don't see yourself, and the vision that you see for yourself, you need to make sure that you're ultimately communicating that, because if you don't see it, how do you expect someone else to see it? And that ultimately has been one of the things as well that I've ultimately learned throughout the years, that setting those hard goals that ultimately push me to ultimately reach a new realm of what I thought was impossible yesterday into a new realm of possibility today is ultimately what I want to do. And yeah, sometimes we may fail. We may, not get the results that we ultimately want, but that also means that we're, just keeping on pushing the needle forward each and every single day. And one of the things that, I see and I'm always, wondering and, super surprised about is that, if I look at, what we're doing today in terms of the daily videos and how we're structuring them and how we're also uploading them as well, I would have never, imagined, that when I speak to people and I'm like, hey, I'm doing 130 something days of, posting each and every single day on YouTube, they're like, wow, that's serious determination and serious drive to do the thing. And yes, for sure, it is, to an extent. But now I don't see it anymore. I see it as something that I have to do. And if I see it like that, that means there's some truth or some nuggets that I can take from that, which are the things that you may think are impossible. They become, your daily norm once you start doing the thing. But it ultimately comes from doing the thing that ultimately forms every single thing that, comes as a result of that. And how do you do the thing long enough as well? I think is also super important in terms of, being the most durable, because you can get to the top, but also understanding that, once you get there, it's a completely different ball game to then stay there and stay, playing at the highest level. And also understanding that, the momentum and the drive that you have today, you need to somewhat carry that over every time, each and every single time, over and over again, to be able to sustain it. And understanding that once you catch that wave, it's not a time to celebrate and say, hey, we've won, we've succeeded, we've done this. It's a signal to double down on the things that you believe. Because at the end of the day, the way I see it, today is ultimately, building the future by setting really hard goals that ultimately allow you to push through those times as well. That you may feel like, hey, it's not working out, as I expected and as I hoped. But ultimately pushing through that ultimately becomes the reason, or makes you want it a lot more. And that's something that I've learned as well, pushing through the times where we're getting 1 to 2 views per video, but ultimately understanding that I set this really hard goal and I know that I'm going to obtain it no matter what. And through that, we may continue and we may just start posting, or we may decrease the frequency in terms of uploads. The future only holds the future. You never truly know what's going to happen. But ultimately, understanding that setting hard goals, things that you may seem like are impossible, today, become your new realm of possibility into the future. And with that, you also realize that, there's so many different forms that ultimately compound as a result of that. And it's also just capturing that compounding, leverage as well. How can you build different inputs that ultimately result into 10xing your outputs? I had this whole notion that, doing like, not being the fastest, or, just taking time on doing things was the mode or the way to do things. But the older I've gotten, and the way that I've, somewhat rewired my brain, is being the fastest, being the first, and also being the best. And you don't always start by being the best instantaneously. It's something that happens through repetition and time. And how can I use this in order to, form the compounding modes that I ultimately would want to form, that ultimately gets me to the end goal? And how can I just dig deeper than ever before in order to get to where I want to get to? And I think that is one of the most important things. I always say, like, it's one of the most important things. But ultimately, understanding that each and every single day is a brick into the foundation. So make sure that the brick that you're building ultimately compounds into the future that you ultimately want to build. And understanding that each and every single day ultimately is a opportunity, and a fresh opportunity, to create new things, to build new things that ultimately help people as well and create value. And with that, it comes as a result of setting hard goals. And I think hard goals somewhat are also good for humanity. And I'm just thinking about this as I'm speaking, because I don't have a script or anything, but I think and I believe that, hard goals ultimately help humanity, simply because they create a lot of things that ultimately help other people. And if you have a hard goal that you set for yourself, for example, let's say you want to build the largest food bank in Africa, or the largest food bank in, North America, or wherever the case may be. And if you set that goal to say, hey, I'm going to build, this food bank that's going to serve XYZ people, or, just being as specific as possible in terms of, understanding that this specific food bank is going to serve, 1 million people in this region, and this is what it's going to do in specific detail, then you're ultimately going to understand that, this hard goal is not for yourself. It's more so for helping other people. And how can you help other people? I think that is why the reason why hard goals are worth it in the end. Because it's not for you. It's more so just building for others and being useful to the world. And I think that is somewhat of the reward that comes as a result of setting hard goals. Because you ultimately build it for other people, and you help other people more than you do it for yourself. And you ultimately build that, impact that allows you to transfer your impact, or have a level of impact that ultimately, impacts many people rather than one. And I think that is ultimately something that is super valuable, and you can never put a price tag on that, or quantify, the level of impact that you have on scale, or at scale, is ultimately somewhat of the reason why I think, setting hard goals is definitely worth it. If you know that you setting this hard goal that you may think is really difficult today, but it ultimately impacts, 1 million people into the future, then why not do it? Why not go after that hard goal, simply because you know that it's going to impact 1 million people and serve so many people, and it only takes you to go after that goal. Because in as much as, it may, make you happy, and it may, serve you as well, the ultimate goal is serving others. And that level of impact can never be quantified. And also understanding that, those hard goals are not for yourself, but they're for bettering humanity. And if you look, like, let's say at SpaceX, for example, this is a super, super difficult goal to say, hey, like, we're going to go to Mars one day, or we're going to travel the universe and just, go to different planets. Yes, it's an insanely hard goal, 100%, but it is ultimately, for the benefit of humanity, because, we'll be able to move through planets and ultimately, extend the consciousness of humanity. And isn't that a future worth getting excited for? Isn't that something, worth, setting this hard goal, to know that you're going to impact so many other people, and it's less about yourself but more about how you're going to scale the level of impact that you're going to have into the future. And I think that's what makes hard goals worth it, and being super, super clear on that, on why it is that you're doing what you're doing. And I know that into the future, things will always, find a way to work out, and the world will somewhat always pave a way to make sure that, the grand vision for whatever it is that you're building ultimately comes to fruition. But it ultimately comes as a result of, setting those hard goals and being, super specific about what those goals are, and just moving super fast, but also making sure that you're doing it in the right way. I know that is the modes that ultimately, brings that grand vision. And it's not about you, it's always, about the benefit of other people. And through that level of impact for others, you're then able to, create value that lasts a generation, and being durable as well. Can whatever you're building last 10 plus years and ultimately create value, not only just today, but continues to create value, through time? And I think this is something that I constantly ask myself, is what I'm building, the right thing to create value today and into the future as well? Because in as much as you can create today and it serves for a specific period in time, it somewhat might have a lifespan. And that lifespan, also understanding that how long this lifespan is, ultimately means that, it has an expiry date. And I've mentioned this in a previous video, where your systems or your products ultimately need to have an expiry date, because you constantly just need to reinvent them. And these are my personal beliefs in terms of, what I think, the way that I would approach building the future today. And it all starts by setting hard goals in specific details. And just going for it 100% and helping as many people as possible. You may fail, and we may fail too, but ultimately things just, things don't happen just because you think they're going to happen. They happen because you take action. Technology increases and gets better because people build the things. They do the work. Medical, or even, television or anything, whatever the case may be. They just don't automatically get better. They get better because people take action. And if your contribution is 1% towards anything that is built in later on, so be it, as long as you're creating value for today and into the future. And you may fail 100%, but ultimately going each and every single day, knowing that you're building the future, not for yourself, but also for other people. And that's the benefit, I believe, of setting hard goals. It's not for you, it's for other people, and being useful to the world. And the more useful you are, the more value you can create, and the more you can scale your impact. And I just want to come on here and just share that message, something I've been thinking about. And if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my newsletter that I recently just rolled out. And also, if you want to connect with me, X, LinkedIn, Instagram, all the links are in the description. And I will see you guys in the next video.